Well, so it was just confirmed to me that the grand jury has no billed Travis Scott, which is great relief to Travis. It's something we were hoping for. It's something we expected based on the lack of evidence. And to be honest with you, we're very thankful for the job that the police and the district attorney's office did. The day after the concert, we being Travis and I and his management team, all met with the police. Travis answered all their questions until they had no more questions left. And we've worked hand in hand with them over the last year and a half to give them everything they needed to bring today about. And I'm glad that after such an exhaustive investigation on the part of the DA's office and the police, that everything was presented to the grand jury and they decided there was no criminal liability on Travis's part.
But you said you knew there were like 6 no bills? Is that what you said, or were they?
Apparently there were 6 names that were submitted to the grand jury. Some of these people were affiliated with Live Nation, with Scoremore, with the security company CSC, and the grand jury has decided there's insufficient evidence to indict us to all of them.
Travis, at what point, did Travis ever tell you at what point during his performance, or if at any point during his performance, he was notified that anything was happening in the crowd?
He was never notified, and in fact, what ended up being developed before or during the course of the investigation is that at 20 minutes until 10 o'clock, a police officer contacted somebody from the security company and the head of Travis's security and told them as soon as Drake leaves the stage, Travis needs to end the concert. So these 2 individuals went backstage and they met with the guy who's he's called an auto-tune operator, who could speak to Travis through his earpiece. And he said, as soon as Drake leaves the stage, we need to close the show. Do your final number and you need to get off the stage. Nobody knew why, or at least nobody in our camp knew why. And so as soon as Drake left the stage, the auto-tune operator told him, do your closing number and get off the stage, and he did. And so that's one thing the police were always in agreement with, is that Travis did everything the police asked of him, even though it was indirectly, but he did everything that was asked of him. And he closed the show exactly when they told him to do it.
Do you know what charges would be considered by the grand jury?
Well, no, see, we're a little bit unclear with that. I mean, nobody could really articulate what the possible charges would be. So we assumed that it's involuntary manslaughter, negligent homicide, reckless endangerment. There's all sorts of possible charges it could be. But then when you start looking at each charge individually, you realize there's really no evidence to suggest these things. There's 2 ways they could have come at Travis. One would have been if they believed that he was involved in the planning of the concert, the planning of the venue, and failed to provide proper security, or that it was set up in a negligent manner and you could have predicted people could have been killed. But by contract, Travis had nothing to do with that. That was all Live Nation. So then they look at, did Travis do or say anything from stage that could have caused this? For instance, had he said something like, everybody riot, everybody go crazy, storm the stage, and people were hurt, that could be criminal. But he didn't do that. And so after they reviewed the tape over and over and over, the police concluded that he didn't say or do anything that would make him criminally liable, because he never encouraged people to do anything that resulted in other people being hurt or killed.
Was it ever established why you said the officer and the head of Travis's security told the auto-tune guy to close it out after Drake left? Did anybody ever find out why they never explained, hey, people are getting crushed? Why there was not more urgency placed on that message?
No, we don't know that. The police, the officer, who I believe is really the head officer in charge of HPD's contingent that night.
Who was that? Do you remember?
I believe it was Officer Satterwhite, but I'm not positive. But he was the ranking officer at the scene from what I understand. And to my knowledge, what he told them is tell Travis as soon as Drake leaves the stage, shut it down. So, you know, what we have since found out is apparently at around 9:40 they declared it an emergency disaster area. And so the police decided not to close it at that time. And in fact, it was Chief Finner the day after the concert that held a press conference saying that he huddled with the fire department, with the people from NRG and CSC, security company, and they decided the safest time to close the concert that wouldn't lead to crowd riots. And, you know, if you go back and look at the tape, that's what the chief said. So they made the determination what time to end the concert, and Travis ended it as soon as he was told to end it.
What, you know, we've been reaching out to some of the family members, and obviously there are civil cases pending, but they've said that they want criminal charges, and they would be disappointed if none brought forth. Do you have a message to any of those families?
Yeah, I certainly do. I mean, I feel sorry for their loss. And you know, within days of the concert being over, I contacted either the families or their lawyers offering to pay funeral expenses on behalf of Travis. And every one of them, so even the ones that said, yeah, okay, then came back and said no. I feel bad for them. I know they lost loved ones, but Travis is not responsible for that. Bringing criminal charges against him will not ease their pain. I've lost a child. I know what it's like, and it's a horrible thing to live with. But indicting Travis for something he's clearly not responsible for is not going to ease their pain at all. And I hope their pain, you know, is something they'll be able to live with.
Are they still involved in civil litigation with Travis and other people? And
Right. There's still a number of civil cases going on. I mean, I know the plaintiff's lawyers are very much wanting an indictment because, you know, that would allow them to make more money. It would make their case easier. But the civil lawyers that I know well who are involved in that case have known for a while there is no criminal case. It's still nerve-wracking for us because there's a possibility until today. But deep down, we know there's no criminal case.
When
They
your
know.
client was performing, did he look out in the crowd and what did he see out there?
He sees nothing. In fact, that's one of the things we did present to the grand jury is the lighting scheme for that concert. There were hundreds and hundreds of lights, all of which were trained on Travis no matter where he was on the stage. Lights coming straight at him, lights coming from above him, and lights coming from below pointed up at him. So his range of visibility is limited to the first 4, 5, 6 rows of the stage. And the only time he can see further out is when the lights start flickering on and off on the crowd. But that's just instantaneous. At the same time, he's walking, you know, down a runway or he's running down the other runway. So he's not stopping to look out there and look over all the crowd. And, you know, we talked with the prosecutor about it who has knowledge and experience with lighting and understands that when you're up on a lit stage like that and the crowd is dark, you can't see what's going on, especially 40, 50, 60 feet back.
And you presented that to the prosecutors to present to the grand jury. Do you know that they showed that to the grand jurors?
I don't have any reason to think they didn't. The Harris County DA's office has always been pretty open about letting defense lawyers present a written, not an oral, version of their position, which is what we did.
Does a no bill today mean that there could be no charges in the future if there's new evidence that's presented?
If there's new evidence presented later on, yeah. It depends what the issues were that were presented to the grand jury to begin with. And I don't know if they, because it is secretive, they're not going to tell me, did they present murder, reckless endangerment, involuntary manslaughter. But typically, once a case has been no-billed, you don't see it resurrected.
I want to be clear on one thing.
extremely
You
rare.
had said, so when you said that Satterwhite and the head of Travis's security went to the auto-tunes guy, did they tell Travis, end it after Drake is finished, or do one more number after Drake is
Do your
finished?
closing number. His closing number is like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And if you look at the tape, as soon as Drake leaves the stage, he does an abbreviated version of his last song and then tells everybody, be careful going home, I love you, you know, go Houston, or whatever it was that he said. But he ended it within 2 minutes after Drake left.
In your investigation in supporting Travis, did you ever find out about the people who tried to tell, like, the camera operators, hey, people are getting trampled, anything like that? Why more warnings within the crowd weren't heeded?
Well, you know, I saw some of those tapes, and there's people that are pretty far back in the crowd yelling at a camera operator, and the camera operator's trying to listen to them and listen to the people talking in his ear and keeping his camera trained on what he's supposed to keep it trained on. And so I don't know if the camera operator's really paying attention to what's being said because he's up, like your camera operator's trying to do his job. But they're so far back in the crowd. People are saying, well, I was yelling. I don't know why Travis couldn't hear me. Well, because there's 38 or 39,000 people screaming and yelling and jumping up and down. Travis never heard anybody yelling to stop the show. He heard people yelling, but he couldn't hear any particular thing that anybody was saying.
What,
Did you ever get a
what do you
specific
think
head count?
people should,
Go ahead.
is there anything Houstonians or community city leaders or anybody writ large involved in events like this could learn from everything that's happened the last year or two?
It's hard to say, and I'll tell you why. One criticism that people were faced when all this began is there should have been more security. Well, between the 700 security guards and 530 Houston police officers that were there, that was the largest contingent of security ever for any event in Houston outside of the Super Bowl. And so if you had had another 200, 500, 1,000 security guards there, I'm not sure it would have mattered. As far as the festival type of concert where everybody's standing up and they're in pins, there's tons of festivals that do that. They just did a similar setup at Glastonbury last weekend for Elton John with over 100,000 people, and nobody was hurt. The variable is that the crowd that was attracted to this concert is young people. They had been pent up because there had been no big festivals like that since COVID started. And I think people came and they were overexcited. And people were pushing and shoving. And I don't know if all the security in the world could have stopped that unless you had a security guard every 3 or 4 people. And that's just not practical.
Well, the criticism wasn't specifically about security. It was also about crowd management. But nobody was paying attention before Travis ever took the stage that the people at the front were so packed in they couldn't even sit down at that point. That nobody noticed that.
Well, see, and the thing is about that, you could very well be right. My investigation focused on Travis. If I was representing Live Nation, if I was representing the security company, if I was representing the people in the control center who are supposed to be watching all this on video, I may feel totally different. But from Travis's point of view, he doesn't have people that are surveying the crowd to see if he should take the stage. The people that do that are the people that are producing the concert. And I don't know, maybe they should have been able to spot that early on, because my understanding from what I've been told by law enforcement is that most of the injuries that took place between 9 o'clock and about 9:10, 9:15, which means right before the concert started and within the first few minutes of the concert. So if that's true, and that is what the command center is showing, I mean, I'm told there are text messages at just a couple minutes after 9 about people being pulled out from the crowd and having to get medical care. So, I'm really not qualified to say whether or not they should have stopped the concert at that point. All I know is they didn't stop the concert, and if they wanted to, the easiest thing in the world to do would have been to tell Travis, stop the concert, and it would have stopped. HPD before, the last time there was a Astroworld concert 2 years earlier, when he was 2 minutes over curfew, somebody went back there at HPD, I think it was Chief Finner, and just flipped the switch and the concert was over. It ended when HPD said to end it. So they have the ability to do it. Should they have known? That's a question for somebody else.
Did you speak to Travis before this? What was his thoughts as today was going to happen?
We talk all the time, and he's been extremely confident, very hopeful. Of course, he's nervous. This has had a huge impact on his career. He lost a lot of sponsorships, a lot of endorsements, a lot of concerts and festivals wouldn't sign him because they have to get him insured. And as long as there was a pending criminal investigation, it makes it extremely difficult to get insured. Now he's going to be able to pick back up where he left off, which is great because, in this country, everybody's presumed innocent. And the police have done one of the most exhaustive investigations in the history of the Houston Police Department. The DA's office has had several senior top management working on this case, and if there was anything they could have indicted him for, they would have. And they didn't. So that tells you that this guy should not have, he's been punished severely through collateral consequences.
Will he ever do a festival again?
Do what?
Will he ever do a festival like this again?
Sure. Oh, he's been in festivals over the last year, and Thailand. I think there's one in Brazil.
No,
one
will
in-
he do Astroworld?
Yeah.
Oh, Astroworld?
Yeah.
You think he'll?
Would he do it? Yeah, I think he would do it. Will the city of Houston or NRG do it? I have no idea.
When did he exactly find out 10 people had died at his concert?
My understanding is it was later that night. That as soon as the concert was over, his security job is to get him off the premises before, the crowd starts offlowing out. So he left, and I know later that night he was told there was a problem without knowing all the details, and then he went home, and that's when he was filled in exactly as to what the problem was. But while he was at the concert, he had no idea. Of course, nobody did. The first call I got that night was like, I left there about 8 o'clock, and I got a call at 11 saying that people were overdosing in the crowd, and that somebody's going around sticking them in the neck with the needle and killing them. And so I went back to Astroworld at like 11:30. And when I got there and met with the police chief and the fire marshal, everybody was under the assumption that there was a crazy guy with a needle poisoning people. And so nobody was really sure what happened until some point, later that night or the next morning.
Ken, to be clear, no one has been indicted today.
That's correct.
And you said that Travis was he was one of 6 people who were no bills today.
Yes, they were targets of the grand jury, and they
Was
were all
it 6
no-
or him and 6?
6.
So he was one of.
Yes, he was one of 6.
Did he ever testify in front of the jury?
No. No, but unlike some of the other people, he did sit down with the police and spent hours talking to them. But it was interesting because when I first got involved, he said, I said, well, they want to meet with you. He says, bring them to my house. I said, well, I think you and I need to have a very long conversation first. He said, well, I'm going to talk to them. If you don't want to be here, that's fine. Because he was adamant. He said, I didn't do anything. I'm not going to refuse to answer.
He was
them."
taking ownership of it then.
Absolutely.
Did
And the
he,
police showed up at his house, and they spent 2.5 hours sitting at his table, talking to him, asking questions, recording the interview with our permission. I mean, he's been 100% cooperative.
Did he? Was a statement from Travis part of your grand jury packet?
No. No. But the police, the DA has the statement, the police have the statement. It's a lengthy
did.
recording,
Okay.
which is probably a better indicator of the truth than a written statement that your lawyer draws up for you. I mean, everything they could think to ask him, he answered without hesitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
It's good to meet
much.
you. Thank